everybody. Welcome. If you're joining us here, we are starting one of our new platforms here on Zoom. So it's a little new, and it looks like Laura's joining us. Hello. Um, and so, again, welcome. We have Kim joining us today. I'm so excited. She is from, is it Active Nutrition? I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Active Bariatric Nutrition. Yeah.
And Kim and I met through a mutual friend. His name is Rob. He's been coached by Kim, and he just had the biggest raves to share. He's going to actually join us on another program coming up. Kim, and I, and just kind of talk about his experience and all of that. But in the meantime, I just knew I had to have Kim on separately and kind of tell you guys about what she does, because it is such a special niche. Like, there is nothing out there that I know of like this. So people who are wanting to kind of get active after bariatric surgery and are wanting to learn more about how to fuel your workouts and how to make the most of your nutrition, Kim is your person. So Kim, with that, I'm just going to kind of turn the pegs over here to you for just a second while I get onto our Facebook page and start that. So I'm going to put myself on mute, and I want you to tell them about you and what you got you into all of this. So
sure. Yeah. Thanks.
It's asking if we're on mute. We should not be. I'm hoping that people can hear us.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kim, and I'm going to kind of do some research here on that end.
Yeah. Okay. Mine doesn't show, I can hear you well, and it doesn't show that I'm on mute. But I'm Kim Tirapelle. Thanks for having me today. I am a registered dietitian, and I specialize in bariatric sports nutrition. Just a long story short, I started my career as a dietitian working inpatient, and I covered the bariatric floor where people had their surgeries, and I basically educated them on their post-op diet progression. And then from there, I worked inpatient for some number of years. And then because I had always been an athlete, I was into sports nutrition. And so I actually began my career as a sports dietitian by volunteering at a Division I university locally here where I live. And they eventually brought me on as the team dietitian there. And I worked there for 7 years. So I got a lot of experience working with athletes at, the collegiate level. And then as well as I worked with professional athletes after that. And eventually after that, I actually went back into clinical and was the full-time dietitian in a bariatric surgery center for the last 10 years and got to work with patients both pre-op and post-op. And what eventually led me to opening my business, Active Bariatric Nutrition, was I just found that folks had so many questions after their surgery. They're wanting to exercise, they're wanting to fuel their workouts, and they just don't know how to do it. And there's not a lot of information out there. And so this gave me the opportunity as a dietitian. I had experience in sports nutrition to help bariatric clients then who want to become more active. They have, training goals. They want to maybe build muscle, or they're wanting to, train for a half marathon, whatever it might be, or just get started with exercise. And I help them to optimize their nutrition so that they can meet those new goals. And so in my business, Active Bariatric Nutrition, I work one-to-one with clients, and we help optimize basically their nutrition. I develop a nutrition meal plan for them. We set goals, accountability. And so I help them basically fuel whatever their goal might be. So it's been a great journey. I've really enjoyed it thus far, and I'm really excited about my new business, Active Bariatric Nutrition. So it's been great so far.
So Kim, let me ask you this. So if somebody is wanting to, say, run a half marathon or run a marathon, do you also help with that piece, or is it mainly just focusing on the nutrition around it?
Yeah. So as a dietitian, I just focus on the nutrition piece. And so what a lot of times folks will do is they come with me, or, come working with me. They may have a workout plan. They have a trainer that they're working with, or a physical therapist, or they're working with a running coach, whatever that might be. But I leave that to those professionals. And I focus just on the nutrition piece.
Okay. Perfect. That's good to know. And I'm looking to see if there's any other comments here. If you're joining here on this Zoom webinar, we cannot hear any participants. I think Laura was concerned about us being able to hear her. All we can hear is, all you can hear is me and Kim. You're welcome to use the chat feature, though, to speak amongst yourselves. If you're on Facebook, please feel free to say hi there and let us know. Use the chat feature as well. So no worries. You can be in your pajamas. You can be comfortable. You can have lots of commotion behind the scenes. We can't hear any of that. So it's all good. With that, Kim, we're going to kind of just jump in. I will say what we're going to do today is we're going to allow Kim to kind of just talk about her passion here and her passion project, because it is definitely that. And she's going to be sharing for a little bit of time, maybe 30, 40 minutes. And then what we're going to be doing is opening up for question and answer. Now, if you have questions in the meantime, please feel free to post those in the chat feature, and we will be taking time to answer those questions as we go through. If there's something really pressing as we're going through, also feel free, and we can always stop if we need to as well. So at that, Kim, I'm going to be muting myself so you can't hear me in the background. But just take off, and I'm going to be sharing my screen with Kim's slides here. Let me go ahead and do that. I have her presentation pulled up. Okay, here we go. Can you see that, Kim?
Yes, I can see it. Perfect.
Okay,
excellent.
Perfect.
Okay, if you don't mind going to the second slide. So today, let me just talk about the intro, right? So optimizing your nutrition to fuel your workouts after bariatric surgery. And again, I'm Kim, bariatric sports dietitian, and I'm just really excited today because I get the chance to share some basic information about how to fuel your workouts. And I really want you to take away some things that maybe you can implement, hopefully as soon as today after this presentation. So if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Sure.
So what we're going to be talking about today, just to give you some objectives so you kind of know what we're going to go over. So we're going to talk about sports nutrition considerations for bariatric athletes. We're going to be discussing the nutritional impacts of bariatric surgery for active individuals. We'll talk about traditional sports nutrition guidelines versus bariatric guidelines and how do we merge those two opposing areas of nutrition advice. What to eat before, during, and after your workouts as a bariatric athlete, vitamin and mineral supplements of interest, and how to gain muscle after bariatric surgery, because I get that question quite a bit. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So when we talk about sports nutrition considerations for bariatric athletes, I always let folks know that this is an emerging area. I wish there was tons of research that you and I could, jump to and go, oh, these are the guidelines for a bariatric athlete or someone that has had bariatric surgery who's now wanting to start running or wants to start lifting. How do they change their bariatric guidelines to now fuel these movements? And there just isn't a ton of research yet. That is one of my main goals in my business at Active Bariatric Nutrition. And I have a podcast as well that I release once a week, is trying to gain more information from experts and hopefully getting more research done as well so that we get more good guidelines for this clientele, for this niche, because it's just unfortunately not a ton of information. So we basically have to use the sports nutrition guidelines that are out there and we apply those to bariatric athletes with some modifications. So what are some considerations that will impact your sports nutrition needs? Of course, what type of surgery you had. So did you have a gastric sleeve? Did you have a Roux-en-Y? Did you have a duodenal switch? There's going to be some considerations that'll be different depending upon which surgery you had and how that impacts your absorption. Length of time since you had your surgery. Are you just fresh out of surgery within the first 3 months? Are you 6 months, 1 year, 5 years? That too will impact how we look at your nutrition. What kind of activity are you fueling? So of course, depending upon what you're doing, an endurance athlete may have different goals in terms of their nutritional intake versus someone that's trying to gain muscle. So we have to look at what type of activity you're going to be fueling. What's the duration of your activity? Do you typically work out 30 minutes, 45, 60? Are you an endurance runner where you're going out there for, longer than 60 minutes, maybe 1 to 2 hours or even longer than that? We need to know that. What is the intensity level of your activity? Is this more kind of a just, a light workout? Are you in a phase where it's just lower training, or are you really pushing it? The intensity level's hard at each workout. How many times a day you're working out, those types of things we look at. What are your personal goals? And I will say this is one of the biggest considerations because of course, every one of you is unique and each one of you is going to have different goals. And again, all these other things that we just went over are all going to be individualized as well. So that impacts how we're going to develop your nutrition plan as well. And then personal preferences, food tolerances. Again, everyone's different on that. Some people will tolerate, dairy and some people don't. Some people tolerate red meat and some people don't after bariatric surgery. So we really have to look at all of these things as we develop a nutrition plan for you. You can go to the next slide. So nutritional impacts of bariatric surgery. So I just wanted to go over this because again, there's things to consider. Someone that's just had bariatric surgery, that itself, of course, is changing how our body is going to utilize nutrition, how we absorb it, how we metabolize it. And then in turn, after that, if you're going to go and try to fuel your activity, we have to really understand how, your nutrition changes after bariatric surgery. So I wanted to talk about that just briefly. So as you all know, after bariatric surgery, it reduces the amount of nutrition that can be consumed at one time, as well as throughout the day. So for someone that then is turning around and trying to do more activity, this can lead to decreased overall energy intake, earlier fatigue during exercise, or what we call bonking. And so, for example, if you're new to working out after your surgery and you're just like, yeah, I do feel tired all the time. Well, it could be as a result of you've had bariatric surgery, your overall intake has been reduced, the amount of nutrients that you're absorbing can be reduced, and that impacts your ability to metabolize that for energy, to move your body. And so those things are tied. And so that's why that's such an important piece to optimizing the nutrition so that you can actually fuel these workouts better so that you feel better. Of course, bariatric surgery reduces the amount of fluids that can be consumed at one time. And this can lead to dehydration during exercise or overheating. And that's a risk factor for someone who hasn't even had bariatric surgery. All athletes have to really focus in on fluids. And oftentimes we forget about it. We forget about that whole fluid piece, right? Because we're thinking about what are we going to eat? How are we, eating before, during, and after our workouts? But liquids are very critical in maintaining, of course, a proper hydration state, but also your body temperature, keeping that cool. So we want to be able to sweat and basically help cool our internal core temperature. And so if we're not drinking enough fluids, because again, that's somewhat reduced after surgery, that can impact your ability as well. Decreased absorption of vitamins and minerals. Again, this will depend upon which surgery you had, but this can lead to muscle cramping, fatigue, poor recovery after training, decreased bone density over time. Nutrients of interest that we really hone in on, especially as a bariatric athlete: iron, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and calcium. And let me just say with this real quick, I'm going to have a slide here at the end talking about these in more detail, but there are other vitamins and minerals that are important too. But these four are really critical for athletes, whether you've had bariatric surgery or not. And so pairing that bariatric surgery piece on top of being an athlete makes these four really critical. So we talk a lot about that. I work with my clients on their supplementation, making sure we're getting the adequate amounts, meeting our daily needs. Of course, just compliance with your vitamin and mineral supplements can be an issue. And so after bariatric surgery, I often get clients who, I thought I didn't have to take these forever. I just took them for the first few years. Oh no, these are for life, right? And if we do have deficiencies, this can lead to poor performance when we're exercising. Decreased intake of carbohydrates. So obviously after bariatric surgery, what is our main energy source that we focus on? Protein, right? Protein. And carbs really kind of get a bad rap, so to speak. The thing about it is that carbohydrates are what fuel our muscles. Protein is actually spared when we exercise. Our body doesn't want to use our muscle tissue as an energy source. We want to use the carbohydrates that are stored in the muscle. And so eating a lower carbohydrate diet, because that is what we are educated on after bariatric surgery, it can lead to early muscle fatigue during high intensity exercise bouts. So if you're doing higher intensity, you're running at a faster pace, or think about you kicking in at the end of a 5K or a 10K and you really try to pick up your speed a little bit, or just pushing those last several reps. That requires carbohydrate. And so that lower carbohydrate intake can be problematic for a bariatric athlete. So we have to address that as well. And then many sports nutrition products, which are concentrated in carbohydrate, can lead to issues for our bariatric athletes. They can lead to nausea, vomiting, diarrhea during or after exercise. And if someone that's had a bypass, can lead to dumping. So that's another issue that we run into with bariatric athletes is we have to find what fuel sources will work for you during and around your workouts. So those are some of the things we have to think about. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed right out of the gate. There's lots of things that we consider when we're working with a bariatric athlete. You can go to the next slide for me. So I wanted to just show this to you visually because this helps me. I'm a visual person. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a total visual person. I love tables and things like that. But I wanted to show you what are the differences between traditional sports nutrition guidelines and bariatric nutrition guidelines, just to show you kind of the differences. So think about it. A traditional sports nutrition, recommendation is going to be a higher carbohydrate diet, right? Because we just talked about how important carbohydrates are. They are the main energy source, especially at moderate to high intensity levels for our muscles to draw upon. And so a sports nutrition diet is going to be higher in carbs, whereas a bariatric diet is going to be higher in protein, lower in carbs. So that can impact how you perform. Of course, a traditional sports nutrition diet is going to be more higher calories, right? Because they have the full capacity of their stomach and their intestinal tract to take in whatever amount they need, right, to meet their needs. Whereas, of course, you've had bariatric surgery, we are reducing the amount of overall calories you can take in. So that's going to be opposing. Another difference is going to be for a sports nutrition guideline, larger volumes of meals and snacks, right? Generally speaking, for athletes, we're telling them to eat on a consistent schedule, 3 meals, 3 snacks. We're trying to pump in carbs and protein every chance we get. For a bariatric athlete, we're still going to be trying to get in, obviously, optimizing your nutrition at meals and snacks, but the portions are smaller because you have a new small stomach, right? And so you can't just take in any volume that you want. So we have to work around those parameters to find out how much you need to do the exercise that you're wanting to do. And then lastly here, large volume of liquid intake versus a smaller volume of liquid intake, same thing. You can't just gulp and chug as much as you want. You can't eat and drink together, right? We have to separate things by 30 minutes, food and drink. And so this makes it more challenging. It increases the risk of dehydration for bariatric athletes. So again, these are some of the main guidelines that you will see are totally opposite. So how the heck do we get these things to work together? So we'll talk about that. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So how do we fuel then bariatric activity properly, right? It's like, that's the magic question. Okay. So first off, I wish there was some silver bullet that I could say, we're all going to do this one thing. Everyone can do the same guidelines. And that's just not the case. That's not the case for anybody, right? Trial and error is going to be a key thing, right? And finding out what works best for you. Because again, all those variables that we talked about in the first slide, what surgery you had, when you had it, what, what you're doing in terms of your goals, what is your intensity level, all these things are individualized to you. So you can't just eat the same amount as your friend, right? So we have to figure out what is going to be your recommendations. And so that's going to be based on all those variables that we talked about. So we look at determining your goals, achieving your goal weight, maintaining weight, building muscle mass. What phase are you in right now? Okay. Which of those is kind of the phase that you're wanting to work towards? Because that's going to impact your nutrition. Do you want more energy in your workouts? Is right now you're just like, look, I just need to feel better in my workouts. Like I'm so fatigued. I can't even get through the workout without feeling like I need to take a break, right? Do we need to optimize just your workouts? Setting a PR. Maybe you have been training for something, all right? And you have been running and you're going to try and run this 10K, or maybe you're trying a half or a full marathon, or maybe a cycling event. So maybe that's your goal. And so we're trying to optimize that training program with good nutrition to make sure that you can get through whatever this event is. Maybe you're trying a brand new event, right? What is the duration of this event? Is it short? Are we doing, an under an hour? Is it over an hour? Because what you're going to find today when we talk is that the hour is kind of the breaking point where under an hour, we're going to have certain nutrition recommendations, and over an hour, we're going to have different ones. So again, it will be dependent upon your duration and what this event is. How many times a week are you exercising? That's one of my very first things when I'm talking to someone. And I get this question all the time. Kim, am I a bariatric athlete? Like, this is what I do. And I'll say to them, okay, well, how many days right now are you exercising? What are your goals? And typically what I tell folks in terms of, am I a bariatric athlete? I'll say, are you moving your body purposely? Are you aiming for a specific goal? Like you're trying to maintain weight, or you are trying to gain more muscle, or you're training for something, but you're actively, purposely moving your body each day? Then yes, that's what I consider as a bariatric athlete, because you're going to have some differing needs than someone that's just maybe, walking, but they don't have any other set goals. So that's kind of how I define a bariatric athlete. You're purposely moving your body. You're consistently exercising, typically at least 3 to 5 times a week. Maybe you have specific goals that you're working towards. So what I always do when I start with someone is we look at, where are your bariatric nutrition goals? Like, what were you taught? What are you currently eating, right? What do you eat per day at each meal, snack? And we look at that and we build on it over time. The last thing I would do is take a client and go, okay, forget all these, we're going to just double everything, or we're going to, scratch all that, protein focus and start changing it. That's not going to work for you. Your body has been permanently changed. So we have to implement the bariatric nutrition guidelines, and then we're going to layer on these other sports nutrition guidelines to help allow you to exercise. One of the things that I will have my clients do, and this is not for life every single day, okay, but I find that tracking your intake or logging intake can be a good place to look at, where am I at right now? This is a snapshot in time, looking at, what is my current intake? What are my patterns? Do I tend to wake up some days at 8 and eat, or some days I wake up later and I don't have any breakfast and I don't eat till lunch, right? Do I tend to eat more of my calories first part of the day, but I exercise in the evening, or vice versa? Do I exercise in the morning and I don't eat at all until noon? What logging allows us to do is get a picture as to what are your current patterns so that we can start optimizing your intake, right? So again, I always tell folks, it doesn't have to be something that becomes an overly obsessive focus. I think that can certainly for some people be triggering or unhealthy. We have to find what works best for you. And this should be just something that tells us some data. It's not good or bad. It's just data. What am I eating in a day? What do my meals look like? What are my timing of my meals? And we try to make some changes to help you feel better. So some accounts, there are some free logs that I have on there. Baritastic, I'm sure a lot of you have heard. Chronometer, MyFitnessPal. These are all free. Of course, they do have paid accounts if you want to do the higher, level. But the basics are fine for the purposes of just getting a good look at what you're doing. And then I always just say, consider meeting with a registered dietitian to discuss your nutrition, because a registered dietitian has been trained, 4 years of bachelor's degree, an internship. They have clinical nutrition knowledge. We can apply medical nutrition therapy, which is basically if you have any medical diagnoses, we can help you with your nutrition to match that as well as your bariatric goals. And so a registered dietitian can really give you specific guidelines that are going to be helpful for you and your goals and your particular, medical condition, your any diagnoses that you might have. So always try to work with a registered dietitian if you can, in terms of finding out what are your nutrition goals. You don't mind going to the next slide for me?
Sure. Hey, Kim, I'm going to just pause for one tiny second.
Sure.
I feel like, I know we're holding questions, but this one here is a question I think, I'm going to press answer live. This is a question I think you just answered within this slide. And I think just reiterating, basically the question is, please define what you consider an athlete is. And I think you kind of answered that, but do you want to just real quickly
go over it again. I know, because I honestly, I get that question all the time. And I try to really make sure that certainly there's not any misunderstanding. So again, if you are purposely moving your body, meaning you have particular activity goals, maybe you're exercising 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week, or maybe an hour, or your goal is, hey, I want to just start going to the gym and lifting. I want to start, gaining some muscle mass. Or you're going to maybe try a new sport. You're going to try pickleball, or it's getting to be summertime here. You're going to start swimming on a consistent basis. That is what I consider an athlete, right? Because you are increasing your overall expenditure every day, and that requires different needs, right? So that's how I define a bariatric athlete, someone that has goals, purposely moving their body at least 3 to 5 times a week. Do more than that, okay? But that's a typical kind of a consistency that, generally speaking, we look at, start maybe feeling tired if we're not fueling optimally. So that's how I define a bariatric athlete. I hope that answered that question.
Yes. Thank you, Kim. I'll go to the next slide. I
Sure.
appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Okay.
So what are some of the dietary recommendations? So let's talk about this, because, again, as I mentioned at the very outset today, guys, there aren't like set guidelines. I wish there were set guidelines, because as a dietitian, we like to rely on the research, right? As a dietitian. And so I wish there was more good research out there for bariatric athletes or active bariatric people. So what I typically do, and what has seemed to work well with the majority of people that we work with, is we utilize your bariatric guidelines as your baseline, okay? And we build from there. So again, just like you would have been taught after your bariatric surgery, we're still focusing on our protein food first, okay? At every meal and snack, when I work with my individual clients, I still ask them, are you eating your protein food first, okay? If you're having a meal, if you're having a snack, because protein, remember, when your overall intake is reduced because we've had bariatric surgery, protein is really important for so many functions in our body, which is why it is prioritized. It is the macronutrient that is prioritized after your bariatric surgery, because our body needs it for so many things. Muscle, which is going to increase our metabolism, for hormones, antibody function to fight off infections. Protein is used in everything that happens in our body, right? So that is one of the reasons why it's still a priority. Even as a bariatric athlete, we'll still focus on getting our protein. But then because we just talked about how carbohydrates are what fuel our muscles, we do need to start adding that in, right? So I'll talk to my clients about balancing out their plate with some fruits or vegetables and a whole grain starch. And so a whole grain or starch. Okay. And what I do is, again, this is going to all be based on your tolerance level. We'll focus on eating our protein, then we'll move towards our vegetables or our fruit serving, and then we will move towards our whole grain. And so I typically have folks eat in that direction unless they have a big endurance event, and then the whole grains do become a little bit more critical because they provide more carbohydrate, more bang for your buck in a serving. And then continue to separate food and drink by 30 to 60 minutes, just like you have been taught since you had your surgery. That's still going to be important because, again, your body has been changed. Just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you can just, forget all those guidelines, right? So you still have to separate your food and drink by 30 to 60 minutes to make sure that we're not having any issues there. Now, increasing carbohydrate intake based on your training level and how you feel. So again, what I usually do with folks is, because they'll ask me, I get questions all the time, like, how many carbs should I be eating? And so what I usually do is, again, we find out what baseline level you're at right now with your carbohydrates. And then what I will typically try to start with is maybe adding in 15 grams of carbohydrate at a meal, and we increase incrementally by about 15 to 30 grams at each meal. That way, in a total day, your carbohydrates have increased. Typically, bariatric clients can tolerate about 30 to 45, maybe up to 60 grams of carbohydrate at a meal. And I'll just give you an example. One banana is 30 grams of carbohydrate. Okay. So it's not as much as you might think, right? So I know when I say 30 to 60 grams, it's like, well, what does that mean? So again, an example would be 30 grams of carbs would be like one banana. Okay. So some folks, maybe they can't eat a whole banana. That's just too much at once. Okay. We cut that in half and we build from there. Because over time, as you get farther out from surgery, you most likely will be able to start incorporating more carbohydrate. Okay. But we still focus again on our protein. May need to eat more frequently to meet our goals, pack protein-based snacks to carry with you. So again, I know that there are so many different guidelines on frequency of meals after bariatric surgery. I can tell you in the surgical center that I used to work at, we didn't recommend typically snacking because what the kind of, not fear, but what we didn't want to encourage was going back to any kind of mindless eating. But my argument is for someone that's a bariatric athlete is because your needs are going to be increased, it gets a lot more difficult then to meet your needs if you're only eating 3 times a day. Because again, our volume is reduced per meal, right? So we can't go, okay, great, let's just have more at each meal. Well, if you can't eat it because you're full, then what? So we have to find out other times to maybe get in those additional grams of protein or carbohydrate, right? So typically what I will work on with my clients is we find a schedule that works best for you. And that may include adding in some snacks so that we can meet those elevated needs. Sipping throughout the day. So again, this is a big piece. And I'm going to have another slide here on fluids, but we forget about fluids. We think about just calories, carbs, protein, fats, our macros, all these things. And fluids kind of take a back seat, right? But fluids are critical, you guys, especially as we're entering the summer months here in the States. As it gets hotter, it is more critical that you are staying hydrated. Or if you're training at altitude, if you have high intense workouts, you're going to be sweating more. All these things impact your fluid guidelines. And so it's really important as a bariatric athlete, because I get a lot of folks that are like, I don't drink a lot of water. And I'm like, we need to figure this out, right? And it doesn't have to just be water, but we've got to figure out this fluid puzzle because it is going to be really important to how you feel in your workouts. So I typically will tell folks to aim for a 1/2 ounce per pound of body weight as the low end of their fluid goals. So I'll give you an example. If I weigh 150 pounds, 1/2 ounce per pound would be 75 ounces per day would be my goal. Okay. Now you can go all the way up to 1 ounce per pound. That's difficult for a bariatric athlete, right? Because again, you can't just chug as much water as you want. But at least getting to that 1/2 ounce per pound is generally a good guideline to go by to stay hydrated. Your nutrition intake should reflect your activity. This is called nutrition periodization. So again, if you are in a lower training phase, maybe you're just doing some walking, or maybe you injured yourself and you're just kind of getting back into things, or you're just starting brand new. Your needs are going to be less as compared to someone who's exercising 4 to 5 times a week of an hour or more, and they have specific training goals. So this is called nutrition periodization, where we're matching your nutrition to what you're doing for your exercise. So we will increase our needs as we have higher frequency, duration, or intensity of our workouts. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So let's talk next, guys, about pre-workout nutrition. We're going to talk about before, during, and after nutrition guidelines now. So pre-workout recommendations, when we look at what should I be eating before a workout, remember that before a workout, we want to fuel our muscles, right? We want to come into the workout so that we have a good energy source. So I want you to think about a car, right? We don't say to a car, hey, let's go drive across country and we forget to put gas in, right? So it's the same thing. Your body needs fuel. So the fuel for working out, for especially for exercise, draws on carbohydrate. So a pre-workout meal should include carbohydrate as the number one thing, but it can also include some protein, all right? And it should be low in fat and fiber. So let me give an example meal of what you wouldn't want to have prior to a workout. You would not want to have a big salad with dressing on there, okay? Or like bacon bits or high fat additives, because that is going to slow the digestion. Fat and fiber takes longer to empty out of our stomach, out of our pouch. And so it slows that nutrition from exiting. In addition, it can just feel like it's like a brick in there, right? You just feel like, oh God, I'm so full. So you want to avoid that in that pre-workout 1 to 2 hours. So primarily, if you have 1 to 2 hours before the workout, we're looking to get in some blast of carbohydrate, about 15 to 30 grams. And I do have some ideas here on the slide. So you could have something like Greek yogurt. You can even have like an egg, which is going to be your protein. But if you pair that with a half or 1 slice of toast, we're going to get some carbs. Remember, 1 slice of toast is about 15 carbs. Deli meat wrapped around a low-fat cheese stick, but having that fruit there. Okay. Trail mix so that you're getting some dried fruit, maybe a little bit of nuts mixed in, cottage cheese with fruit, overnight oats or oatmeal made with some whey protein or Greek yogurt, lean chicken, turkey paired with quinoa and fruit. So these are going to be, again, some snacks that typically are going to be a little bit bigger. So you may have to eat these at least 2 hours in advance. But as we get closer to the start of the workout, even just a handful of dry cereal. I have a lot of clients that will just squeeze like applesauce pouch in their mouth if it's an early morning workout. That can be something that's quick. A lot of folks will just do the Greek yogurt or a little toast with peanut butter or the oats. Those typically work well pre-workout. A couple other points I have on the slide here, avoiding skipping a meal before exercise. So I do get a lot of folks, and let me just say, it can work in terms of if you are someone that works out super early in the morning, and I get this question quite a bit, so I want to talk about it. If you're someone that's an early morning workout person, right? You work out at like 5 or 6, and you're like, look, I'm not getting up at like 3 to 4 a.m. to have like a meal, right? Now, some people will because they feel better in their workout doing that, and that's great. But for those of you that are like, that's really difficult for me, Kim, I want to make this realistic, and that's the only time of day I can work out. What I will tell that person is, it becomes very important then that you are eating carbohydrates at all of your meals during the day, and especially the night before an early workout, making sure that you're eating carbohydrates. So that means vegetables, fruits, whole grains. Okay. Maybe that's, brown rice or quinoa, or some people will even have some oats or things like that at nighttime. It just really, whatever works best for you. My other consideration though would be for you is you can train your body to tolerate small amounts of carbohydrate in that hour before the workout. So let's say you get up, you're going to, you can basically takes about 30 minutes maybe to get yourself out of your bed and get to the gym. In that 30 minutes, maybe you do just have a couple bites of Greek yogurt or a little squirt of applesauce or a little bit of a carbohydrate electrolyte replacement beverage. Any of those options would be better than nothing, ideally. And again, over time, you can train your body to get used to that. So I just wanted to say that because I know that a lot of folks have that schedule, which is that early morning time. And again, guys, we have to find out what works best for you. And some people, they tolerate very little amounts pre-workout. Some people do better with having more. So we just have to figure out what works best for you. And then sipping on your fluids before, after the meal, and up until the workout begins. Again, staying hydrated is so important throughout the day as well as before your workout and then during your sipping your fluids. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me.
Sure. Kim, I just got to say too, it's funny.
Sure.
Like these questions that you're answering people's questions that they're asking. So I think it's great.
Oh, good.
Already.
I know because they're so common, and I get it because there's just no information out there, that has this, these guidelines. So yeah, please keep sending those questions, you guys, because I know they're very common. Totally.
Yeah. And there's other ones too, but we'll wait until the end for those. But I just had to add that. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide.
Perfect.
So keep the questions.
So let's, keep the questions coming, you guys, please. And I promise you, we will answer them. During workout recommendations. So what should I be doing during the workout? Because I do get this question too. Like, hey, if I'm only like going to the gym for 30 minutes and I'm walking on the treadmill or I'm doing elliptical or something like that, do I need to be like buying Gatorade? No. If your exercise is 1 hour or less in duration, you stick with water. Water is fine because for that amount of movement, obviously coming into the session, having had meals, whether you've eaten, a pre-workout or that you're incorporating carbohydrates throughout the day with your protein, that will be sufficient for you. Okay. So important to fuel properly throughout the day, sipping on water during exercise, if it's an hour or less, and it's not very hot or humid out. Because the only thing I would say to this, the only caveat would be if you are exercising and it's less than an hour, but it is very hot or humid out, or if you are a very heavy sweater, you may benefit from some carbohydrate electrolyte beverage. You could just do a G2 or a ProCare or even a gel or a goo in those situations if the workout's under an hour. So if you're working out less than an hour, but you it's super hot out as we get into the heat here. I live out here in California and it gets hot in the summer. If I'm working out and it's like 45 to 50 minutes, and I'm outside, I am generally drinking something with a little bit of carbohydrate. It just makes me feel better. It places my sweats, my electrolytes lost in my sweat. And so you have to kind of just gauge the temperature, the intensity level, the duration of your workout to see what, you're going to need. But typically, if it's an hour or less, water will be sufficient as long as you're fueling properly throughout the day. Now, if exercise is greater than 60 minutes continuous, then you probably would benefit from those carbohydrates and electrolytes because your muscles and your sweat, you're losing that in your sweat and your muscles are requiring that carbohydrate as an energy source to fuel your movement for an hour or more. So the recommendation there is 30 to 60 grams per hour of exercise. Now, again, as a bariatric athlete, you may not be able to jump up to 60. Okay. You may have to start at 25 to 30 and figure out what works best for you. How did you feel? Like when I have had, people that are running a 10K, which is 6.2 miles or a half marathon or beyond that to a full, the carbohydrate being consistent with that throughout your session, starting right out of the gate is very important. Okay. 10 to 20 grams is typically tolerated best at a time for a bariatric athlete, just because again, a lot of carbs at once for some bariatric athletes can cause them to feel kind of not so great, maybe have some cramping or bloating. But that being said, if we're going to be aiming for 10 to 20 grams of carbohydrate at a time, you typically will need it fuel or have something about 3 times in an hour. Okay. So you have to kind of gauge how you're feeling. Again, there's lots of trial and error. I do put up these brands, and let me just say, I have no relationship with any company in terms of any kind of endorsement. So I want to make sure I say that I don't have any conflict of interest where I'm, have some kind of relationship with a brand. But these brands I have found to work well with bariatric patients. And you can Huma, Scratch Labs, Morton products. And do I have people using the Goo brand, the Shot Blocks and Cliff, yes, absolutely. But these are some popular brands that I have found. They just tend to be digested better. They use more natural products. The UCAN uses a hydrolyzed super starch that basically breaks down slower. So you're not having such a big dump of sugar at one time. And so it impacts your blood sugar at a slower rate. So I've had my bariatric athletes tolerate that well. And then I would just also say that some bariatric athletes don't tolerate any sports nutrition products, and we have to look at whole food products. So meaning pretzels, dry cereal, figs, dates. I've had people use all kinds of different things in their endurance sessions that aren't just these sports nutrition products. So again, it's a lot of trial and error. And I always tell folks, we never try anything new on race day, right? This should be things that you are practicing during your training sessions, especially if you are training for an endurance event that's longer than an hour. Okay. So we want to figure out what works for you. For fluids, if you're working out, typically an hour or more, it should be about 8 to 16 ounces per hour or more, ideally more if you can. But again, we have to look at that timing and how much you can sip each time. And then again, I just mentioned this, we never try anything new on race day, right? We always have practiced these things because you do not want to have all this training. And then you go out onto a course and at mile 12, they're like, hey, we got these goos. And you're like, oh, yay, I'm going to try this new product today. And guess what? It has caffeine in it or something that bothers you and you end up having diarrhea and you're in the bathroom. That just ruined all those weeks of training, right? So we never want to try anything new on race day. We want to be working on these different things and finding what works best, tastes best for you in your training. So these are just some guidelines. So I'll just summarize this slide by saying, if you're an hour or less, typically you can stick with water. But if it's very hot or humid, or it's a very intense workout, or you are a heavy sweater and you lose a lot of salt in your sweat, you can usually notice that if you have a lot of white on the brim of your cap, or you notice a lot of white on your face when you get home from like endurance sessions or runs, you might be a saltier sweater. And that may be where you would benefit from an electrolyte carbohydrate replacement beverage if the workout's less than an hour. Over an hour, carbohydrates for sure. Okay. And electrolytes. We want to make sure that we're providing those energy sources for our muscles and to replace what we are losing in our sweat. You don't mind going to the next slide for me? Let's talk about what to do after a workout. So post-workout recommendation. So we've talked about pre-workout. What's the main energy source that our muscles draw upon? Carbohydrates. So remember, pre-workout, we're trying to get our carbs in. Post-workout, we want to make sure we're putting back that energy in that we just used in the workout. So protein is very important for recovery because we want to heal those little small muscle fiber tears that we have in the muscle tissue that we did during the workout. And of course, we want to put the carbohydrates in that our muscles just used, right? So stored energy in our muscles of carbohydrate is called glycogen. And we want to make sure that we are incorporating some carbohydrates in the meals after the workout so that we're refueling and refilling that tank of carbs in our muscles so that the next time we work out, again, we have that energy source to draw upon. Okay. So what I typically will tell my clients is in a post-workout meal, we want to have at least that 20 to 40 grams of protein. And again, that's going to be dependent upon how much you can tolerate, but I'll give you an idea. 3 ounces of chicken, turkey, pork, beef, seafood, that's 21 grams of protein right there, right? That's the palm of your hand. A deck of cards is about 3 ounces of protein. That's 21 grams right there. So that's kind of we want to get to that level if possible. And if you could do a little bit more, great. And then we want to try to get in some carbohydrates, about 30 grams. And again, I'll give you the example of if you did a whole banana, that's 30 grams. If you do a half cup of, we're looking at, rice, something like that, pasta, we're getting at least over that 15 to 20, and we're getting upwards of 30 if we're adding any additional like fruit or vegetable as well. And then we want to make sure if we can try to eat within an hour after exercise, but I know some folks will say, I'm not hungry after a workout, especially if it's really hot outside. Like I get that. Sometimes that's where a protein shake where we add in some fruit to get in some carbs rather than eating a meal can be a good option for you. It's cold, it's liquid, it goes down easier. That can be a good option for you. But guys, if you can't eat within that first hour after the workout, it's not going to derail you. It's just that if we're trying to optimize strategies, if you can get something in after that workout, that's going to start helping those muscles that are starving for energy get some fuel, right? And your body's going to soak that right up. So if we can get that nutrition in within the hour, that's great. If not, try to make sure you're getting in something within the first 2 hours after the workout. We want to replace sweat losses. So guys, when we are sweating in our workouts, we're losing fluid from our body, right? For every 1 pound lost, we want to replace those fluid losses with 16 to 24 ounces. So just to get basically refilled with our fluids. If you lose a pound, if you get on the scale pre-workout, you see what you weigh, you get on after and you're down a pound, we need to put back in 16 to 24 ounces just to get back to where we were. Okay. And then I do have some post-workout meal ideas here. Protein shake with some fruit added would give us the 20 to 40 grams of protein with some carbs, 30 grams of carbs. You could do a deli meat sandwich because, right, the carbs are coming from the bread. The deli meat cheese is giving us some protein. A whole grain tortilla with shredded chicken or veggies or salsa. That's going to give us our combination of our protein and carbs. Greek yogurt with berries, chicken or other meats paired with quinoa or veggies. Eggs with whole grain toast topped with peanut butter would be a quick option. Cottage cheese with fruit or nuts, that would give us some carbs and protein. And then overnight oats with berries. And you could put in some whey protein or Greek yogurt to get that protein boost in there as well. So it really doesn't matter what time of day you work out. You can find something that we get our carbs and protein in after our workout to start healing that muscle and get us ready for our next day of workouts. If you could go to the next slide for me, let's talk about fluids here. So again, I know I talked about this at the very beginning of today, and I just want to reiterate that fluids are super important as an athlete, okay? As someone that's moving their body, you are sweating. This is how our body stays cool so that our internal temperature doesn't overheat and we start getting basically fatigued and have to stop. So we want to sip throughout the day. We want to aim for that minimum of 1/2 ounce per pound of fluid up to 1 ounce per pound. So again, if you're 150 pounds, let's just use that as an example, that would be 75 up to 150 ounces per day to stay hydrated if you are active. Rehydrating with that 16 to 24 ounces of fluid per 1 pound lost in sweat. Carrying your fluid bottle with you. These are just little behaviors that just help us, because when it's in your eyesight, like if I don't have this fluid bottle near me when I'm working with my clients, I will go all day. And I'm sure all of you can kind of, relate to that. I'll go all day. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't had anything to drink since 7 o'clock this morning, right? That's not going to do. As a bariatric athlete, you can't go, oh, let me catch up. Let me chug this 16 ounces. You can't do it, right? You have to sip, sip, sip. So keeping fluids nearby in your eyesight can help be a visual cue to be sipping. Fluids that are, typically well tolerated, so that we don't just talk about water all the time, because I know that water can be problematic for bariatric folks. But adding some flavor enhancers, if you want to do it more naturally, adding some fruit slices or veggie slices, you can add in electrolyte mixes if you're wanting to just get some flavor to it. Hot or cold herbal teas, especially if you've been told no caffeine, that can help you to stay hydrated and just mix up the flavor. So it's not just the plain water, right? I love peppermint tea. I don't know if you guys like that, but that's like one of my favorites. Sports drinks, trial and error. So what I tell folks is, first of all, we shouldn't be drinking sports drinks ever unless it's around the workout, right? We don't need Gatorade at dinner. We don't need Gatorade at a meal unless it is literally going to be carried into the gym with you, right? So sports drinks are only for when you're performing activity. We don't need them the rest of the day. But some examples that you could, consider trying, the G2 and ProPelle will typically have a lower amount of carbs, so about 7 grams of carbohydrate per 8 ounces. That might be a good option for someone that's exercising for an hour or less, especially if it's hot or humid or you're a salty sweater. Gatorade or Powerade does have more carbohydrate per serving, so about 14 grams of carbs per 8 ounces. And that's going to be better for you, again, if you need more carbs, so about an hour or more. And I'll just mention too, they both have the same electrolyte content. So the good thing about G2 and ProPelle, they do have the less sugar. So again, if you don't need as much, but you still are, you're sweating, it still will give you that sodium and potassium that you need to replace that you're losing in your sweat. Trying different temperatures of fluids can be helpful in increasing fluid intake. Adding some whey protein to water, milk, soy milk to boost the protein can be another option, just to give it different flavors if you're looking for that as well, or trying to sneak in more protein, for example. You could go to the next slide for me. So I wanted to just touch on this. Even though this might sound like it doesn't go with this presentation, I do want to talk about the importance of micronutrients. And in fact, this week on my podcast, the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast, I talked about micronutrients of interest for bariatric athletes. So I wanted to just make sure I include this because, again, oftentimes when I work with folks, we're just looking at calories, carb, protein, fat, fluids, and we forget about these, right? What's in your food? What's in your fluids? Vitamins and minerals that are helping us to perform, because vitamins and minerals play critical roles in our metabolic pathways that produce energy. And if you're wanting to exercise at higher levels, or you're wanting to change your body composition and be able to lift more weight over time, if you're deficient in your vitamins and minerals, you're not going to be able to do those movements because you're going to be too tired, because these play a role in energy production. So iron is very critical for oxygen carrying capacity of red blood cells to the muscles. So iron's really important for bariatric athletes, especially if you're an endurance athlete. Vitamin B12 helps with DNA synthesis and red blood cell formation. B12, if you're deficient in it, just like iron, you'll feel very tired all the time. So again, these are nutrients that you're already at higher risk of deficiency for as a bariatric patient. And so as an athlete, these become even more important because they're required for you to produce energy, right? Vitamin D and calcium, they're critical for bone density. And so, as well as muscle contractions. And so, of course, for folks that are, they're eating less intake already, and maybe they're not incorporating their calcium and vitamin D, they can develop stress fractures, especially again, if you are doing weight-bearing activity. So we want to make sure that we're taking in our bariatric vitamins and minerals every single day for life. This is critical. Okay. So what I also will get a lot of questions on is muscle cramping, is Am I deficient in something? Well, it can be, okay. Muscle cramping, let me just say, can have nothing to do with nutrition status. It could just be that you're starting a new exercise. Maybe you overdid it. You're trying something new. So it can have nothing to do with nutrition, but it can have some relation to nutrition. So for example, if you're not taking in adequate fluids and you're dehydrated, if you're not getting in enough sodium. And let me just stop and talk about sodium really quick. So I often will hear this. Hey, Kim, I'm drinking coconut water during my workouts and my runs because it's less sugar. It tastes really good. But I'm still having some cramping, or is this an okay option? So guys, the thing about coconut water and why it's not the best option for you as a someone that's active and sweating is because when we look at the composition of sweat, you are losing way more sodium than you are potassium. And what's high in coconut water? Potassium. And there's minimal sodium and lower carbs. And as someone that's exercising, that is not matching what you are needing. You need carbohydrate and you need more sodium. So if you're going to drink coconut water because it's one of the things that you like and you tolerate it and you're like, Kim, oh my gosh, you can still do it. Just make sure you're getting some carbohydrate via something else and make sure you're taking in salt elsewhere. Okay. So if you're like, I can't live without my coconut water, just understand that you need to get salt and carbohydrate then from something else. Okay. It can work. You just got to make sure you're doing it elsewhere. You may benefit from incorporating more carbohydrates if you're cramping. I do find that sometimes when people are glycogen depleted, their carbohydrate stores are low. They may feel like they're cramping in their workouts. And then I'll just also say that we often forget, are you giving yourself some rest days? Like, I totally get it. You're pumped. You're excited. You're wanting to start this new exercise routine. You're like, I'm going, more is more, right? No, more is not always more. More is often not a great idea. So give yourself some time off because your body needs rest to recover. And you're already at a lower intake level. So it makes it more challenging to recover really optimally. So take some rest and recovery days. It will not derail your goals. Okay. And then I always just remind folks, please consider discussing with your doctor, whether that be your surgical center or that is your primary care. You should have labs drawn every single year, annually, for life. This is not like I just need to get them done in the first 4 years after the surgery or whatever, arbitrary timeline there is out there that you've heard. These are for life, guys. We have changed your body permanently on how much you can take in and how much you can absorb. And vitamins and minerals play a critical role, as we just talked about, in all these things. And so if you're not having your labs checked, you'll have no idea what level you're at, right? And so it can be such a simple fix by supplementing with whatever vitamin or mineral that you need more of to help you get those levels up so that you feel better. And so those labs will do that for you. I always recommend if you know that you're going to get discharged from your surgical center, ask them for their lab order sheet so that you can take that to your primary care and let your primary know that this is something that needs to be ordered every single year for life. Okay. It can just be that easy. And then you're good to go. So make sure you're getting your labs drawn, take your vitamins and minerals every single day for the rest of your life. If you don't mind going to the next slide for me.
Sure.
So I wanted to talk a little bit today, you guys, about muscle gaining because I get a lot of clients. In fact, that's probably one of the most requested, assistance they need help with, right? They just don't know. They want to gain muscle. But again, think about it. What does muscle gain require? It requires energy intake to be able to build muscle. It requires more protein. And that can be challenging, especially if you're early out in the first, 6 months post-op. You're not going to generally be able to gain a bunch of muscle, really even in the first year after surgery, because your intake is so low, right? Some folks are eating under 1,000 calories. I mean, majority of folks are eating, 500, 600, 700 calories in the first 3 to 6 months. It just depends on, your surgical center's diet progression. But it's difficult. You're not going to gain a ton of muscle in that first year because your intake is so low. But over time, it can be done. Okay. Now let me clarify the difference between gaining muscle and gaining strength. Gaining muscle, when I talk about muscle gaining, I mean actually putting on muscle mass. You can get stronger by doing these movements, right? By implementing resistance training, you can certainly get stronger. By that, I mean, maybe you start at 5 pounds and now you're up to 10 and 12. Okay. But the nutrition is the piece that helps you to gain muscle so that you can continue to get stronger. Okay. So for bariatric athletes who may want to increase muscle and who are lifting weights consistently for exercise, here's some nutritional guidelines that you might want to consider. So again, resistance training of 3 to 5 times per week is the typical recommendation for someone that's wanting to gain muscle mass. You need that resistance training with progressive overload built in, meaning you are increasing your weight over time, the repetitions. That is all can be all kind of changed and manipulated over time. Increasing calories. And so what I tell someone that wants to come to me and they're like, hey, I want to start, gaining some muscle. What again, as I do is we figure out where you're at right now with your calories, figure out what your tolerance level is for maybe adding something in. And we start with a very conservative increase of maybe 200 calories a day. And we see how we go. Versus someone who hasn't had bariatric surgery, I may increase them 500 calories or more. If they are, having a hard time gaining muscle, we may go much higher. But because you're a bariatric athlete and we don't have that capacity, we might need to start with something just as simple as 200 calories and we go up from there. And then for protein is the other very, very critical piece to someone that's wanting to gain muscle. So increasing calories, increasing protein intake. And the recommended range that's out there that has been shown to be consistent to help with gaining muscle mass is 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Now, let me clarify. This is not what you weighed when you had your surgery or the first 3 months after the surgery. This should be based on either if you know your lean body mass, or you can use even the goal weight or your maintenance weight that you have reached. That kind of is that weight that you're like, okay, this is where I've gotten to. This is kind of my happy place that I don't seem to be, going to be changing much from. You can use that weight to figure out your protein goals. So let's say that that's 150 pounds. You would multiply 150 by 0.7 to 1 gram, right, per pound. So, and I don't have a calculator. I didn't do this off the top of my head, but if you multiply out 0.7 times 150 and then up to 1 times 150, that range is going to be anywhere from, let's say 80, 90, 100 grams up to 150. And let me just say, guys, I do not recommend that you start with the high range. Always start on the low end because we can always go up. But it's a lot harder to just blast your body with this huge change and jump up to the high end. That's going to be very challenging as a bariatric athlete. So I always just tell folks, start on the lower end and build up. Okay. Once you've addressed your overall nutrition intake, a supplement of interest for muscle gaining is creatine. Now, let me just say this first. We don't jump into supplements until we've addressed your nutrition. Okay. Because I get this question all the time, like right out of the gate. It's like, okay, Leah, can you give me my macros, but also what supplements can I take? And I'm just like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I wish there was a silver bullet. I wish there was one supplement out there that we all could just take and it gave us all the results we wanted, right? There is no supplement out there that does that. Okay. What we do know that works is eating properly, figuring out what's the amount of calories, carbs, protein, fats, et cetera, that you need in a day and getting that dialed in first. Okay. Because if you shortcut that and just think that loading in supplements is going to cover up those kind of shortcomings of the diet, it's not going to work. So you can take creatine all you want, but if you're not eating adequate calories and protein, you're not going to see the results. Okay. But creatine monohydrate, and I actually had I had one of the world's leading researchers on my podcast a few weeks ago, Dr. Darren Kandow, and he researches creatine. That is his main focus area. And he talked all about the research, and it is the number one most researched supplement out there. I would never talk about one that doesn't have good science behind it. But creatine monohydrate, we actually synthesize in our bodies. So it's not like something that your body doesn't already make. It's actually made from 3 amino acids in our body. And I always just remind folks, you don't ever start anything without talking to your doctor first. Okay. So please make sure you talk to your doctor before beginning any supplement, especially creatine. And especially if you have any renal conditions, you absolutely would not want to start creatine unless you talk to your doctor first. So I want to start with that. But back to creatine, our body synthesizes it. We make it from 3 amino acids. We can get it also from eating animal protein in the diet. Vegan athletes, because they don't eat animal proteins, they actually may benefit more from creatine because they're not getting it in their diet. The typical dosage for someone that like you and me that are going to just, hey, I want to gain some muscle and I want to use this supplement. The most well-tolerated dosing regimen is the 3 to 5 grams per day. It takes about 28 days for the saturation of the muscle tissue to occur with the adequate creatine. And creatine is just an energy source that your body uses in the first about 60 to 180 seconds of movement, your body is using creatine. So if you have adequate stores of creatine in your muscle, you can do more repetitions. You can do more faster, harder, longer because you have an energy source to draw upon, right? That is the benefit of creatine. And so creatine has been shown to help with increasing lean muscle mass, strength, power, when we supplement it with properly and we are taking in adequate calories. Okay. So I just wanted to highlight that because I do get a lot of questions on, give me the magic supplements. And really creatine is one that I will discuss with folks. But we're going to focus number one on your nutrition, and then we'll go from there. If you don't mind going to the last slide for me. So in summary, guys, and I hope you found today's information helpful, I just want to summarize by saying you are unique. Your nutrition needs will reflect your personal physical activity goals, your surgery type. So please don't be distressed or upset that your, husband, brother, sister, mother has to eat this amount of calories or then you're only eating this amount. Everybody's different. And it's going to be very individualized based on what you're doing for your activity. We want to build around your bariatric nutrition goals. We don't just start completely disregarding those and, eating all tons of carbohydrates and not eating our protein. We're still going to follow those bariatric nutrition guidelines, and then we will go up from there and round out the plate based on what you need for your exercise. I always encourage folks to plan ahead to have food items on hand that you need when you need them. If you want to really be serious about your goals as a bariatric athlete, nutrition is a key piece. And if we kind of just are like relying on what's around, it's going to make it a lot more challenging for you to meet your goals because you won't have what you need when you need it. So I always tell folks too to try new sports nutrition products cautiously. Never try anything new on race day because they could not go well and that can derail your whole event. But practice what you're going to do on race day during training. And again, sports nutrition products, try them cautiously when you're close to home. And, if they don't go well, you're not somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. Okay. I always remind folks that food is fuel for the body. And I get the question of, Kim, I was taught that I shouldn't be eating carbs, and now you're saying I should eat carbs. And I always just say, because what I'm trying to educate folks on is we're still going to incorporate our protein and follow our bariatric guidelines, but we need to fuel our muscles to do this movement that you're wanting. And that takes some carbohydrate. The amount that you need is going to be different than someone else. So if we look at it from the mindset shift of this is fuel for my body, these are what I'm trying to take in so that I can do these great exercise goals that I have. Oftentimes that makes it feel a little bit more palatable as to like, okay, I'm supposed to eat these carbs now. It generally speaking, if we have that mindset shift of this is fuel for my body, that typically can help us kind of feel a little bit better about what we're doing with our plan. Always chat with your doctor before beginning any new supplements. I want to reiterate that many times today. And then remember, working with a bariatric sports dietitian can really help give you science-backed information and save you a lot of time and frustration. So certainly, obviously, you guys know I'm a bariatric sports dietitian. I'm more than happy to ever, answer any questions that you guys might have and help you to develop this nutrition plan that might help fuel those activity goals that you have. So we'll just go to the last slide here. This is my contact information. And I'm going to go ahead now, if you don't mind, Brenda, let's go through the questions. But this is my contact information, you guys. And if it's okay, Brenda, do you want me to talk about this now or at the end?
Actually, I'd love for you to talk about it now. And since
Sure.
we're not only doing video here for our podcast portion, just make sure and let them know verbally also as well, besides just this slide. Yeah. So I'll just kind of reiterate everybody. I'm the owner of Active Bariatric Nutrition. That's my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services that I do with folks. And you can find out all about my services, my one-to-one programs at my website, which is activebariatricnutrition.com. You can email me, Kim@activebariatric.com. I have a podcast that I release each week on Mondays. It's called the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I bring on guests, experts in the bariatric field, but also exercise experts, people that are doing research on things that might be of benefit to you. And so I hope that you'll find that podcast helpful for you. Check it out. You can get it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Again, or you can just go to my website, activebariatricnutrition.com, and click on the podcast link. You can go to any of my podcasts there. I do have social media. I'm on Instagram at Active Bariatric. I have a YouTube and Facebook channels. They're Active Bariatric Nutrition. And then I do have a TikTok as well, Active Bariatric Nutrition. And I'll just post things on there. I post clips from my podcasts and just educational information there. So certainly check those out. Give me a follow if you don't mind. And don't ever
hesitate to reach out if you guys have questions or you just want to run something by me. I'm always happy to help anytime.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to actually paste that into the chat box on both Facebook and on the chat feature here on Zoom. So I'll copy that and paste it in. And I think we can start with questions. And I know that we have quite a few. Kim, can you see them in the chat feature in the Q&A box? We also have some from Facebook. So at some point too, we'll take them from Facebook as well.
Okay, so I'm just looking in the webinar chat. Someone asked, it is all about relearning patterns, isn't it? And I saw that one come in, and yes, it is. So guys, when we're talking about how to optimize our diet for exercise after bariatric surgery, it is all about relearning patterns, right? It's all about being consistent with our eating patterns. It's all about being consistent with our vitamins and minerals every day. It's about learning how to fuel our body best by making sure we're having our protein, incorporating those carbohydrates that are going to help fuel our muscles. And that might be different than how you used to eat, before the surgery. And so it's all about these new patterns. This is all a new journey. And especially if you're an active bariatric client, this might all also be new, right? And so what's exciting about it is that you're already on a new journey. By incorporating these new nutritional guidelines to help fuel your activity, you can get the most out of your surgery as well. Age and nutrition needs, how do they differ? So what I would say on that, there's not significant differences. When we look at sports nutrition guidelines, there isn't like set guidelines, if you're this age, you should eat this many carbs or protein or whatever. What we do know is that, as we get older, there are certain nutrients that become more important. B12, for example, we may need more or less of iron, generally less as we get older because for ladies, we're not menstruating maybe. And so there are different needs for micronutrients in that way, but still with nutrition, we're going to be matching based on what you're doing for your exercise. So, and that's the same too, even men and women. There's not like for women carbohydrate goal and men carbohydrate goal. They're actually the same. And we go off of body mass for that. So, that would be, hopefully I answered that question. Okay. I think Brenda, you asked me the one from Susan. What if I'm low in potassium, but high in sodium? So that's a good question, Laura. Obviously, if you have certain medical conditions, any kind of renal issue where we have particular, potassium is something we have to be careful, or phosphorus, we have to be careful with that. Then of course we're going to look at the diet differently and make some changes in that way. But in terms of, I think you were asking this when I was talking about our fluids and our electrolytes and things like that. If you're low in potassium, then by all means, obviously you need to increase it. So that's when, if you're wanting to do the coconut water, okay, then obviously you're getting sodium elsewhere, right? So that's where, the banana that's high in potassium or the coconut water can help raise your potassium levels. By all means, do that. Let's see. Okay. Coconut water, yuck. You could do banana. You can really potassium. Honestly, anything red, yellow, orange, or green. I used to tell kids when I taught at Fresno State Sports Nutrition, any questions that I had on the test that asked about vitamins and minerals, I'd be like, literally, if you answer it with any red, orange, yellow, or green fruits and vegetables, you're probably covering that vitamin or mineral. So kiwi, yes, you could do kiwi. Yes, you can. Yep, absolutely. What other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions. I don't want to make sure I miss any. Oh, in the Q&A. Let me look on that.
Kim, when you answer those, I don't know if you have that ability to answer live or.
Yeah, I see that.
Have that. If you do, if you don't mind just pushing the button so that we're addressing those.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this live, which is coffee counted as part of fluid intake? That's a great question. So obviously after bariatric surgery, it is advised that you do not take in caffeine or carbonation, right? Obviously we know for carbonation, it can cause some bloating, cramping. Caffeine, the information out there is so, there's been so much debate on this topic in terms of, does caffeine increase dehydration? And this is what I would say. First of all, if your surgical center tells you no caffeine, please follow your surgical center guidelines. I don't want to overstep anyone's surgical center guidelines. But generally speaking, usually after maybe 3 to 6 months, most surgical centers will say, you can start incorporating some caffeine, but it shouldn't be your main fluid source. Okay. Do I typically, if I have a client that's like, look, I have my 1 cup of coffee in the morning and the rest of the day I'm drinking, my fluids, whether it's from water or other drinks, do I tell them they can't count their coffee? No. What I would say is if your whole day is caffeinated beverages like tea and coffee all day long, that I would say is not recommended. And I would want you to incorporate other fluids that aren't going to be just caffeinated. Okay. But to go back to talking about the research on this, more recently, research has looked at what's the amount of caffeine that really does increase urine output. And it takes a significantly high amount of caffeine from what the research has suggested to really see an increase in fluid losses. And so generally, and I'm speaking in general terms, if you're having a cup of coffee or two in a day, is it causing you to be dehydrated? No. Unless you're not drinking anything else, right? The rest of the day. So you do need to be drinking other fluids. And so in general, what I say is if it's just 1 or 2 cups in the morning, do I count that? Yes, it's fine as long as you're drinking other fluids. If you find that you do better with just counting your water intake outside of like your caffeine or your protein shake, that's fine too. Those are just additives. Those are just added fluids that are going into your body. Okay. So I wanted to make sure I answered that because that's a great question. I know it's a lot of misinformation out there. Okay, so the next one I'm going to hit answer live. All right, so this question is, after the Roux and Why, is it best to take vitamins and minerals with food or before food? This is a great question. So again, I just did a podcast on timing and scheduling your vitamins and minerals. Generally speaking, what I find with folks is that I find more often than not, people tolerate their multivitamin, which has a lot of nutrients at once, when they've had it with food. And that's because I find that a lot of times folks have some nausea on an empty stomach or in the early part of the day. So when I work with clients, what I have found more often than not, and again, you're going to be different, we have to find the schedule that works best for you, okay? And what you tolerate. And so, for example, iron can be better tolerated when we're taken with food and we get less of the GI issues. A, D, E, and K, the fat-soluble vitamins, those are going to be better absorbed in the presence of having some food that has fat in it. So I typically will tell folks, listen, because we have to separate our multivitamin if it contains iron from our calcium by about 2 hours, at least 2 hours. What I'll tell folks to do is let's figure out when to take our multivitamin, right? We got to take our calcium. And generally speaking, ASMBS recommends 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams a day of calcium. And that's going to be best distributed into about 3 servings of 500 to 600 milligrams. It depends on your dose. And so what I'll tell folks is maybe they do their calcium number 1 at breakfast, calcium number 2 at lunch, wait 2 hours, and then take your multivitamin, and then go another 2 hours before they take their calcium at dinner, for example, right? And the calciums should be divided at about 3 to 4 hours apart as well to optimize calcium absorption. So I know that was a lot of timing and information, but to answer your question in general, I find that it's better tolerated when we take it with food and then go another 2 hours before they take that nausea issue. So I hope that answered that question. All right. How far post-op do you recommend to start gaining muscle? Oh, let me answer this live. Sorry. How far post-op do you recommend to start gaining muscle? Again, another great question. This is going to be highly dependent upon your overall intake. Okay. So first of all, are we to a place where you're able to fuel your workouts just so that you can get through a hard workout, right? Because if not, we need to focus on that first. Remember, to gain muscle mass, it does take a little surplus of calories. And so if you're to a point where you feel comfortable adding an additional 200 calories, that might be at least 6 months, if not after that, 9 months and beyond, typically, where people can actually start lifting heavier and they're getting through their workout feeling well. That's probably about the time where, you can start trying to gain some muscle mass. Again, it's going to be dependent upon how much you can take in, right? So some people find that, the first 6 months is usually, no, it's your intake's way too low. Even the first year for some people. It's really going to depend upon where you are for your intake. All right. Another question I'm going to answer live here is, how do you feel about pre-workout instead of food? Great question. And this may or may not go over well, so I'm going to be very honest with you, my professional opinion. I do not recommend relying on a pre-workout drink as your pre-workout source, right? And why is that? Because guys, if that is your only strategy in fueling your workout, just relying on, basically caffeine, which is what most of the pre-workouts will have, without an additional fueling strategy, which is the nutrients that are going to actually provide your muscles with the energy that they need, you're going to find that over time, you're going to need more than just the pre-workout. So great, I got this jolt, I'm ready to go. But if you're having a hard workout and it's lasting, 45 minutes, hour longer, you're going to need more than that jolt. Okay. The caffeine in that pre-workout is not going to carry you through long workouts. In addition, remember that the food and the nutrients that you're eating are helping you with other things, with recovery, with muscle gaining, and pre-workout's not giving you that. Okay. So I'm not a huge fan of pre-workout. A lot of the products out there that are unregulated, they have all kinds of other stuff in there that you may or may not even know you're getting. It may not even have the amount that's in the label, especially all the ones that say proprietary blends. You really don't know what you're getting. And so I am a bigger fan of getting in real nutrition as your pre-workout, getting adequate sleep, staying hydrated. Those are tried and true strategies that we know work. And the pre-workouts are more of a Band-Aid than they are a real true fueling strategy. Okay, and then one other question here I'm going to answer live is, are there better brands of the creatine than others? Great question. So in terms of brands, so first of all, creatine monohydrate is the formulation of creatine that you should look at. Okay. You don't need all these other, when they talk about the hydrolyzed and, all these other fancy marketing terms, what the research has shown and what Dr. Darren Kandow said in my podcast is all of that is hype. Okay. Creatine monohydrate is the formulation of creatine that is the researched one that mimics the creatine that our body makes. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, in regards to supplements, I generally recommend product lines that have an NSF certification. And that means that it has been third-party tested for purity and potency so that you know what you're getting in the product that you're purchasing. NSF, it'll be a white and navy blue little circle you'll see in the corner, or at least GMP, which is Good Manufacturing Practices certification on there. Those will be things that I will tell people to look for. If you don't see those on there, it might not be the best brand. But some brands that I've worked with, Clean Athlete, Momentous, and Thorne. They have good creatine monohydrate products. I mean, I personally use those. Again, I have no relationship with those companies, but they all are NSF certified and blend well with fluids. And you can stir your creatine into Greek yogurt. You can stir it into your drink, and you can take it pre or post workout. It does not matter. Okay. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Are there any other ones that I missed?
Stephanie. Has something in the chat feature, and then I have one on Facebook. Okay, so I'm going to just read this one in the chat feature. It says, I'm 15 months post-op walking 2 to 4 miles twice a week, working out with a trainer, doing strength and endurance training twice a week for an hour, then getting on the ProCare machine 20 to 30 minutes after those training sessions. And I'm just seeing here the scale and machine they have used on the gym stated I need at least 1,500 calories at rest, much less than what I need now that I'm doing all of this exercise. I now know that something is off. I can feel it. Where I had tons of energy before losing 75 pounds, so far weight loss has started sort of stalled. I had surgery in Mexico, so I have no support here in the States other than these types of offerings with the bariatric group gives us. I'm trying to adjust it all, just as you mentioned. I'm an RN with good nutrition knowledge and tons of research since deciding on surgery, but I'm definitely failing here. And I sure need to figure out what I'm going to be doing for trekking for 14 days. Well, wow, Stephanie. So first of all, awesome. I'm so pumped for you. Well done on your training and your exercise. That is so great. And yeah, there's a lot of also kind of misinformation out there as to terms of what our RMR, our resting metabolic rate is. And like, now that we've had bariatric surgery, what does that mean for me? If I go and get these done, it says I'm supposed to have 1,800 calories and I'm barely eating 1,000. So what I always just tell folks is this. So remember, why did we have bariatric surgery? We wanted to reduce our overall intake, right? Because that helps us with, reducing energy intake, which helps us with weight loss. And so, yes, of course, you're going to be in a deficit, right? But what I would just say to that is, for someone like you who is exercising so much, yes, you may need to increase calories over time. It is going to take time. So for someone that's a year post-op, that's still at only 1,000, 1,200, maybe, 900, whatever, you're not going to be able to match what the RMR machine says because you just typically just can't do it. You can't tolerate that amount of food. So ultimately, what I tell folks is these tools are great data. They're good information for us so that as we increase more exercise, we kind of know where we should start working towards. But whether you can get to that number is going to be very dependent upon how much you can tolerate, right? And your weight trend and your other goals. So I always just tell folks again, figure out where are we at right now, start logging intake. What is your baseline calories? If you're feeling off, then you probably do need to look at
do I need to add in some snacks? Do I need to eat a little bit, increase my calories, start adding in 100 calories or 200? Do I need to get my labs drawn? Are my vitamin and minerals on point, right? Because sometimes it can be a micronutrient issue rather than a macronutrient issue. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I giving my body recovery? Those two play a role, right? Am I stressed out in life right now and it's just I'm dragging? Because sometimes it has nothing to do with nutrition. And it could just be that there's other things going on in your life, right? That can impact how you feel. So what I would just say is, again, we need to figure out where we are at baseline. And again, if you're feeling off, try to increase your protein. Maybe adding in a snack pre-workout can be very helpful as well to having more energy. Do you want to go ahead on the Facebook question right now? Why don't we do that one?
Yeah. I think you may have touched on this, but she's asking, it's Mercedes. She's asking about Gatorade or Powerade Zero. And I think you kind of talked about that, but I think her question may have been after. So I'm not sure if we...
Okay. Yeah. Gatorade, Powerade Zero. So again, when we're looking at those, you're basically just getting electrolytes in those because they're not giving you any carbohydrates or calories or anything like that. And so they're mostly just for electrolyte, to be quite frank with you. And again, what do we need to fuel our muscles? Carbohydrates. So again, is there a time and a place for a Gatorade Zero? Absolutely. If it's a low intensity workout, less than an hour, it's not a high, hot, humid condition, and you just want to get some electrolytes in or just some flavor to your water, totally fine. But I don't recommend drinking those all day long. Okay. Ideally, if you can try to save those for around the workouts so that you're getting those electrolytes around the workouts, that's fine. But if you are doing something longer than an hour or more intense, that's where carbohydrates play a role. And the Gatorade Zeros and those types of products just aren't going to give you the energy that you need. And I see another question over here. I'm afraid to go to work out because of dumping syndrome and gas. What can I do? Not eating the wrong things, just everything goes straight through me. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I hear you. And I do have some folks that are just more sensitive, especially to exercise. And what I would just say is take a look at what you are eating in the pre-workout. Is it too much concentrated sugar, carbohydrate? Is there's maybe more fat in it or fiber that's not digesting rapidly enough and getting out of the way, so to speak, for your exercise? And then that's just kind of going through. Are you eating and drinking together? You're not separating your food and drink because that can flush things through, especially with the Roux-en-Y. Is because if you're talking about dumping syndrome, I'm assuming you're talking about the Roux-en-Y. Gas, here's the thing about gas. It's so funny. Brenda, I did a funny reel. When I first started my business, I was doing funny reels. And one of my reels was on gas because listen, we got to talk about it. It's part of it, right? It's part of this journey. And it was like one of my most popular things because it's funny because we have gas. It happens. And sometimes that can just be from the foods that you ate, higher protein diet. It can be, that maybe you've had higher fiber foods prior to the workout that can lead to gas. And it's just, unfortunately, sometimes part of this process. It's frustrating. It can be embarrassing. I understand that. And what I would just say again is it probably would be a good idea to write down what you're eating in the course of the day, time, even tracking like bowel movements, gas, things like that. And then you can look back and be like, okay, what did I have? I don't tolerate dairy. Maybe that's an issue for me, especially with gastric bypass. So logging intake can be a really good feedback mechanism to seeing what's happening and what could be leading to those symptoms. Yeah, string cheese, light string cheese prior to a workout. It could be the combination of, it just might not be digesting well because that's primarily protein and fat, even though it's light. Dairy. I mean, it could be a combination of those three things. You might want to move away of that product, especially something that has dairy pre-workout. Any other questions?
I think you hit most of them. I think a lot of this too, Kim, like some of these, like if somebody wants to go more in depth too, obviously it sounds like you schedule free consultation calls. Is that correct to say?
Yes. So absolutely. So guys, if you're wanting to learn more about my services or you just want to talk a little bit about kind of your goals, I do discovery calls and you can go onto my website or you can just go to activebariatricnutrition.com/discovery and you can schedule a consult with me. And that way we can kind of hash out like, what do you actually need? What are kind of your main goals or issues that you're struggling with? Would we be a good match together to work together? I have both a 3-month and a 5-month program. So I have a 6-session package and a 10-session package where we work together. And we really establish your nutrition to meet whatever goals those are that you have. And like Brenda said, if you do have questions though, feel free to email me. You can message me on my Instagram, or feel free to schedule a free discovery call, and we can always go through, what your personal goals are.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Let's see, share screen. And I'm going to go to, I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to actually go up. I actually have some things pulled up here. I have Kim's website. This is her website. So this is what it looks like when you get to Active Bariatric Nutrition. I also have her services page pulled up, so you could go to that, and it talks a lot more about her services. On her top drop down menu, she also has podcasts. So we talked about that, how to find her podcast. So, easy, simple. Also, all of her socials, her Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, you can go through those and check all of those out. And she has lots of fun little videos and fun little things there. I just wanted to kind of
thank you.
I just thought, what, sometimes people like to know, where to find. So that's all. And also kind of why I'm up here, I'm also going to share too a little bit about ProCare. We, as our sponsor, we did a bunch of short little videos, and I'm going to just kind of showcase one of them. One of the questions that sometimes people ask post-bariatric surgery is, what is the right amount of exercise after weight loss surgery? And one of the little videos we did was on that. And so I'm actually just going to show a little short, tiny video. It's like 1 minute long. And Kim, I'm going to have you tell me if you can hear the audio on it.
You bet.
So I'm going to pop that up. And if we can't, I'll just share the link.
Okay.
The right amount of exercise.
I don't hear any audio.
Okay.
No.
Let me do this. Let me stop sharing for just a second, and I'm going to do it with audio, because sometimes, there is an audio button, share sound. Maybe I need to click on that. For some reason, it's not allowing me. So I'm just going to share I'm going to have to check that out, why that's not sharing, but it's okay. I'll just share the link. And I want to invite people to not only like Kim's, she has a YouTube channel, but ProCare Health has a YouTube channel, and we are adding all of this, including this replay will be on there on our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to go back and you want to look at some of the slides, you want to screenshot some of those, if you want to find out more information about any of this or kind of go in depth. Sometimes things like this, I feel like it's super helpful to go back and listen to again. I'll go back sometimes and listen to some of our replays a couple times just to kind of let things sink in, because when you're listening, sometimes you're doing other things. I was taking notes because I wanted to make sure and capture as much as I could. So it's good to go back. So it's reference. Usually our replays are on there within about a week post this. So I will post our YouTube link so that people can just go to our YouTube channel. I posted Kim's earlier in the chat feature. But please feel free. And also on her website, again, you have that actual option as well. So anyways, Kim, anything you want to say in summary?
No, I just thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to chat with everybody. And I just always reiterate, remember, this is just fueling your body for those goals that you have. And after bariatric surgery, the great thing is that you're on this new journey and you can do these excellent, exciting fitness goals. And we just have to look at the nutrition and see how we can optimize that. So please reach out anytime if you ever have questions or you're interested in working with me. I'm always here, happy to help you any way I can.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim.
And thank you.
We appreciate you being here. She'll be joining us again coming up. I had to have to look at the date, but it's it's within the next few months, along with Rob, who has been subscribing to her services and wants to talk about his experience. So be watching for that as well. If you subscribe to our channel, you'll get notifications. We also, ProCare Health does have on our website. I am going to share that really quickly because this might be of help since we're kind of doing a lot of new things here. That's my notes, so I apologize for just popping directly there. On our ProCare, here's our website, our ProCare Health YouTube channel. If you just type in www.procarenow.com, it will take you to our website. And it's probably pulling up a little slow because I have every tab open under the sun. I'm getting ready for a support group right after this. So I was preparing for that as well. So I got lots of stuff pulled up. Right up here at the top is our support group hub, where we're now housing all of our live and replays. Kim's is on there as well right here. And I believe if you've subscribed, you can actually go back and re-listen to the replay on this as well. But we also have some more upcoming ones that I'm just going to kind of show you and feature, and a link to our YouTube channel. I also want to mention at the top of our ProCare, when you get there, you will have this menu. There also is a free sample button. So if you've never tried ProCare, please feel free to. And Kim, you're familiar with our products, which that's kind of how I met Kim. Rob is the one who connected us, and he was saying that you had been promoting ProCare, even though she's not an affiliate.
We use ProCare in our I'm not. No, but I love it. No, we use ProCare in our surgical center all the years that I worked there. Absolutely.
So thank you, everybody. I know this got to be a little longer than normal, but I think there was just so much good content. You know, you can't stop when you're going strong, and you have so much good stuff to share.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Bye, have a good day, everybody. Bye.